Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday. We made it all the way to Thursday, February 22nd, in case you were interested which one. 2024, specifically. Got it all down? Okay, now you know where we are, located in time and space. Excellent. We're ready to roll then. Lots to catch up on today. Yesterday, a big one-day topic. I think rightfully occupied all of our time yesterday to discuss what really should have been. There were plenty of articles about it, and plenty of people are still talking about it. And how do you know when you're in the middle of a blockbuster story, I guess, unless there are banner headlines, I suppose, all over the place, and why this one hasn't generated banner headlines, I'm just not sure. The essential collapse and exposure, really, of the whole case that Republicans have spent 4 years plus, I think, really, making against the Bidens, collapsing in their face and ending, I guess, or at least where we currently stand, with an indictment of the witness against them upon which they built the entirety of their case. They got to the brink of, and I guess are still working on, still trying to forge ahead with impeaching a president of the United States based on nonsense planted by Russian intelligence operatives. It's a very odd thing to be living through. But we'll catch up more on that. There are some other things, perhaps, that we'll get to. But I really do have some more information to share with you on that. Greg has plenty more on that. Also, I went out and got myself caught up on exactly what the hell it was that Marcy Wheeler understood and that I was missing, and that maybe you understood when we read the story. We certainly got this. The essential element of the, hey, that's not cocaine, it's sawdust story, which was, of course, that, I don't know, there was a picture, and Hunter Biden kind of sort of had it, and it had some substance in it that some people, I guess, could mistake for, I guess, discolored cocaine, except for the fact that in context of it being on a table saw, surrounded by other sawdust, well, anyway, there was that mistake made, if it was indeed a mistake. But what we didn't quite get was, what am I looking at? Why is there a picture of sawdust separated into lines after the fashion of cocaine? And why is that why would anybody do that? And that made me wonder. I didn't know the provenance of this photograph, and so I said, all right, well, it's not cocaine, it's sawdust, but why would you do something like that unless you were a person who was, I don't know, involved in cocaine? Or just like finger painting, I suppose. Well, there's a real explanation, and I've found it. It was probably always there in Marcy's archives, and indeed it was. And in fact, part of the story is that this all comes to light as a result of her having seen this picture originally. I don't know how many days, months, weeks ago. I don't know how far ahead she is on this curve. But basically figuring out from context exactly what this thing was. But where had she explained it in her archives? That I couldn't have told you, and it's very difficult to find out. But I did happen across a Philip Bump piece, because I happen across all Philip Bump pieces. Basically, this is a show about reading Amanda Marcotte, Philip Bump, and a few other people over and over again, and it's well worth doing. Anyway, he actually has an explainer I could share with you later, in case you also were kind of like, okay, I understand that it's not cocaine, but why is it a thing at all? We have our answer. So that, alongside with the collapse of the rest of the case against Hunter Biden, and why there's still an ongoing case at all against Hunter Biden, which is actually kind of wrapped up in the cocaine / sawdust / Russian intelligence operation. It's actually quite a large story. and people just don't know how to deal with it. But people don't know how to deal with anything. It did strike me in the middle of yesterday, trying to make sense of it all and saying, I don't know, we still haven't really reckoned with the fact that a sitting president directed his people to forge electoral college vote certificates, and that seems rather major, and we really haven't gotten our heads around that. So, I don't know. And every day, some part of every day is occupied by me saying, is it worth commenting on any of these stories given that, maybe one of the most important events and documentations of actual events that we could possibly have in this country was just forged before our very eyes, and we're still not really sure what to do with it, and we're still scratching our heads. Should that guy be allowed to run for president again? I'm not really sure. It might be bad for the country to not allow that forger to forge results in an election again. I don't know. Maybe America should have the choice of whether or not we should allow a guy. Should we put a guy in a position again where forging votes could be fruitful for him? Like if he's not on the ballot and he's not regarded as a candidate, if a bunch of certificates from the Electoral College show up on January 6th, 2025 that say, yeah, the Electoral College voted for Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is either not a candidate or let's say has died or something like that, you would know what to do about that, and you would know to say, yeah, these are certificates that are not actually real. But apparently some significant portion of punditry and the judiciary in this country will say, what we ought to do is let's put them in a position where we won't be sure whether those are real certificates or not. Let's make that a reality so that we're all confused again, as opposed to, well, one, we don't want to be confused. Two, that was really super duper illegal, unconstitutional, un-everything, un-American. And this is exactly what this provision of the Constitution is supposed to be about. But here we go. So that and other stories, plus local weather, traffic, and sports on the 8th. Okay, Greg Dworkin is here. He knows what happened locally in the sports scene and is ready to update you. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning. So, yeah, the UConn men lost, which was kind of a shocker.
Yeah,
but,
all right.
They'll fix that by the time the end of the season comes around, or they won't, and that's what's so fun about it.
If there is a big basketball event coming up soon, someone's going to have to tell me about it. It might happen in March, I heard, but I don't know anything about it.
That's madness.
Isn't it, though? All right. Well, aside from that, the rest of the world is fine.
Yesterday's show, which was a lot of fun. I'm glad Armando had time to come on. Mm-hmm. We did, I think, capture the essence of it when we said, here's the deal. That basically David Weiss, the prosecutor, was going after Hunter Biden and was going to do some mild stuff, some misdemeanors, what's called a diversion.
Yeah, right.
I'm not going to send you to jail for your gun stuff. I'm just going to deal with it in some fashion.
Bad. Don't do that.
It's going to be relatively minor. And then, as they were trying to clinch the whole thing,
right, big plea deal,
they somehow or other screwed up and put the judge in the middle of it.
You know what? They love that.
The judge said, I don't want to be in the middle of it. You guys sort it out. And in the process of doing that, Hunter Biden's team said, okay, we accept pretty much everything you're offering, but this, we're done, right?
That's usually the point of a plea deal.
For some reason, the prosecutor said, yeah, except for this one other thing that we reserve the right to look at.
Right.
And Hunter Biden's team, Abby Lowell, said, no, we're done with everything. And the prosecutor said, no, not exactly. And Lowell said, well, what is this? What's going on here? We can't agree? That's crazy. It's everything or nothing.
We had a deal.
Yeah. And the prosecutor said, nah, it's nothing. So they walked away.
Well,
that's what happened. And it turns out the thing, and we said this on the show yesterday.
You got it right.
The thing that the prosecutor had in the back of his mind was this lie from Russian intelligence that Hunter Biden was involved with bribes.
Yes.
That was the thing that made the whole plea deal fall apart.
Now
it turns out it was a complete total lie disseminated by Russian intelligence, and that's the big story.
Yes, it really is. And keep in mind how extraordinary it is that a lawyer who's billing hourly says, this is the end. and somebody else intervenes and says, no, it's not. It's going to go on forever. But yeah, you're right. Not only was the thing that the prosecutor had in the back of his mind, and I guess if I'm prosecuting, if I believe the lie, I could see why a prosecutor would say, well, I don't know if I want to include this in the deal. This is something serious. Except it turns out, one, not to be serious, and two, really on its face was pretty obviously unserious as well. And the whole point of it continuing, it was never really necessarily about getting to a conviction on the underlying claim. It was just, we need to keep Hunter Biden in trouble for longer so that it looks worse for Joe Biden. And as long as that goes on, it's fine. And they got a prosecutor to just say, I'm going to do that.
Well, that could be it, or it could be just incompetence. But here's how Marcy summarized it in yesterday's Post. The reason why David Weiss reneged on a plea deal was to chase this bribery claim. The reason why David Weiss charged Hunter Biden with a bunch of felonies rather than resolving this in a diversion and misdemeanor was because he wanted to chase the false claims floated by someone dallying with Russian spies. And you're right, it may be because he wanted to damage Joe Biden.
I mean, I think there's the Russians.
But here's the part that she adds. And I'd be willing to bet that if Abby Lowell hadn't asked for discovery that may expose all of this, David Weiss would never have indicted Alexander Smirnov.
That could be it, too. And I think that probably leans towards the incompetence explanation. I would clarify and say, I think it was, I don't know whether David Weiss cared one way or another about how long Hunter Biden stayed in trouble. But
You mean it's not like the Herder report?
I love that name. It might be, it might not be. I just don't know Weiss well enough to be able to say, and I didn't know her well enough to be able to say until people explained her and who he was and what he was about. And it may be that you can convince me of the same of David Weiss, but I was thinking more along the lines of, if there were, in fact, Russian operatives planting this story, I don't know if they ever cared about getting to a conviction for Hunter Biden. But what they did care about was prolonging the smear of Joe Biden on behalf of Donald Trump. And so if it confused and conflicted the courts or special prosecutors, I don't care, just so long as it goes on longer. It might make him look like a fool, but if it makes Hunter Biden and Joe Biden uncomfortable for longer, that's all we care about.
Right. Marcy also reminds us again that at the beginning, Bill Barr was involved in all of this too.
Yes.
So it's yes, a really big story.
Yes.
Todd Zwillich on Twitter says, 24 hours later, it's pretty shocking how much of the mainstream coverage is focused on the implications for impeachment or the details of spycraft. Seems like the real story is apparent Russian disinformation successfully driving the strategy of one of the two main political parties.
Yes, that is also true. I mean, I suppose we have to reckon with it as Americans first on the level of, hey, all the news that we've been reading as supposedly relevant to the next election, one, isn't because it's based on a lie. And then two, what lie? Whose lie? Who was lying? And then we can process the fact that, well, they were lying because they were being told lies by Russian operatives. Bad. But so, we should get there quickly.
I don't know if you saw the very quick Biden, I don't know what you want to call it, a veil microphone.
Okay.
Biden steps up to the mic as he's getting ready to go to California for a fundraiser.
I did not see this.
And,
it was awesome.
Says, I'll have some information about more sanctions against Russia because of Navalny.
Okay.
And as he's doing this, a reporter yells out, so are you going to California to make sure that Gavin Newsom is ready? Is that your plan B?
That's basically
Biden
like yelling
Baba
Booey.
Ready? Are you ready?
Okay.
And then another reporter, these are the only two questions that got out there and that he answered. And another reporter yells, so who do you prefer, Trump or Haley? And Biden just dismissively waved. It was great. He dismissively waved and said, I don't care.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And he shouldn't. Because, again, I think people, are trying to hone in on these stupid little details. And my reaction to that on Twitter yesterday was, convince me that reporters who cover politics are simply not there to take each other's dares and to entertain each other.
Guess.
They're certainly not enlightening us. What a stupid question.
That is a pretty dumb one.
Opportunity,
just in terms of
when Biden is talking about international politics, and that's your question, and a stupid question at that. You only have one shot at your question.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. I guess what's really even more astonishing about it to me is like, all right, we know that these guys are just locked in on horse race politics. I will say this is an innovation. It has never occurred to me to ask one of the horses whether they want to win. But that is a horse race question. Hey, horse. Does it matter to you which other horses are in the race? Actually, I'm going for coming in first. My hope is to never see any other horses. Right, okay. Exactly. I mean,
it's just so weird.
That is an odd question.
So anyway, so this happens.
How do you feel about
all this other
other
news
horse
is happening?
Bad.
And that's the stupid question they ask. And that's one of the reasons why you look at political coverage and you go, yeah, this is really stupid. And you don't really have to pay that much attention to it because there it is in a nutshell. That's, Kristen Welker apologizing for, stupid questions on Meet the Press about not challenging Elise Stefanik, who, by the way, Trump did not list in his short list for vice president, saying that January 6 people were hostages. Why didn't you challenge her? Well, I challenged a lot of other people on a lot of things. That's not the question. Why didn't you challenge her? Well, if I had it to do all over again, I would have done it differently. But I wanted to let her finish her thought. Why? She's lying.
You might as well let her start, I guess. That would be helpful, too.
What you should do is interrupt the thought and say, excuse me, but that's bullshit.
Yeah, that was an opportunity to do that, and
Tim Russer would have done it.
Yeah,
he just would have done it with a whiteboard and been polite about it. But
I don't
would have
know
done
if
it.
he really would have been all that polite. I mean, it's a discussion, right? I mean, it's an interview, and there's back and forth, a give and take.
Yeah, you interrupt and you say, "But you said."
Yeah.
In other words,
that happens all the time.
It's like
That's
our show,
the bedrock of the program.
You interrupt each other.
That is true, and I mean, what's the name of the show again? It's Meet the Press, right? And
right.
So you're there.
M-E-A-T, right.
Where you're going to, what's the point of meeting the press? This doesn't mean stand next to the press and talk.
The press, meet the nation. Right? Just let them lie.
You meet the press because why? Because they're going to ask questions. And the other guys are going to have to answer those questions, right? As opposed to, maybe I finally found my niche. I'm going to go pitch NBC and make a mint with a new show, Be Near the Press.
Right.
That's it.
So let's just
press
talk a
will
little bit
stand
more
next
about
to
this
you.
Important story here, which is that the Russian disinformation is driving the Republican Party, and that's like a BFD.
Yes,
Jamie Raskin
on the wrong side
says,
of the road.
And this is in HuffPost today. Jamie Raskin calls Biden impeachment inquiry a product of Russian disinformation.
What a nightmare.
The Justice Department said a key witness in the impeachment probe has had contacts with officials affiliated with Russian intelligence, with details, real details, lots of details.
All right. Okay. It would be nice to have those, and we're going to get them. But
and see, okay, so this is where it stops because, reporters are still trying to wrap their head around this and the fact that Joe Biden is actually flying to California.
Yeah, and maybe maybe Putin is going to run in this country and be on the ballot.
But I say step back and look at the big picture. You have one of the political parties in this country
who
wants to get rid of reproductive rights for women, including in vitro fertilization.
Yes, right. That's
and establish national Christianity, a Christian nation. In nationalist fashion.
I'm going to be left out of this one. Okay.
Who are completely and totally devoted to an apocalyptic version called the Seven Mountains, which we know because a follower of it happens to be Alabama Supreme Court Justice who just said that God basically said I had to do this. And no, I'm not exaggerating.
God is spending a lot of time in Alabama.
Okay.
All right.
And that's the other big story. And what I'm saying is if you step back and look at the big picture, at this time in 2008, Kerry was leading Bush.
2008. Okay.
People were writing Obama should drop out. And this whole thing about, well, what's going to happen with the election? Yeah, it's scary. So people are sort of really twitching over it. But I still think, number one, Biden's the favorite. Nobody can guarantee a win, but I still think he's the favorite.
Okay.
And number two, I think a lot of this stuff is going to wind up mattering a whole lot more than whether or not Gavin Newsom has a plan B and Biden's going out to talk to him about it.
Yes. I don't really know where that's...
With voters,
I guess, okay.
They just don't pay attention until after Labor Day. I don't know how many times we have to be, clear about this. February polling tells you nothing, which is why Kerry led Bush. And we all got fooled by it. We thought, hey, this is good. But it doesn't matter. Things happen after the conventions in August and Labor Day, and then people start paying attention.
Right.
And that's when
if you're wearing
and where
white
it
pants.
matters. And until then, it doesn't. And what I'm saying is I think people really do care about things like Dobbs and IVF. I mean, after all, we just had an election in New York 3. And the Democrat won
couldn't wait for
by
Labor Day on that.
neutralizing the immigration border stuff and concentrating a whole lot of money on what happened with Dobbs. And the IVF thing hadn't really happened yet. And what happened? Tom Suozzi won East Egg, the place in The Great Gatsby.
Well, it had to do with the light on the dock, I believe.
Yeah, well, this is going to matter. And so is Russian disinformation and infiltration of one of the parties.
Yeah,
to some people, it's going to matter. And so I think
it sounds like
still remains the favorite because the Republican Party as a whole is in terrible shape.
It is a whole, as a matter of fact.
They've promised to give all the money from the RNC to Trump because Larry Trump will be there making sure that happens, and they don't have money for the regular candidates. And I just don't think people are seeing the big picture here.
I like that side of the picture. It is, who knows? It's difficult to envision any picture when there are so many variables. Like, I don't know whether they're going to count votes. They might just forge results, kind of a thing. But that doesn't work for everybody else. There's no way to forge electoral count votes for Senate and House races. So, I mean, if you're going to be out there running on, all women should be frozen and used for breeding later or something. Like, well, I don't know. That's going to be real popular. There's a lot of women with a lot of plans to live their own lives. Yeah. All the dire this is interesting too, is I know this is very frustrating for many of you who would have or did in fact predict this sort of thing given the Dobbs decision. This lays out the groundwork for all kinds of things: a national abortion ban, a ban even on in vitro fertilization. And a lot of people said, no, you're going too far. And all of that is in fact coming true. But don't be too discouraged. A large part of politics is being yelled at as for being crazy initially and then turning out to be right. That's just sort of par for the course. So don't let that bother you.
Yeah, that's where the term DFH came from, right?
Yes, really, kind of is, isn't it? It's every time the dirty effing hippies say this, that, or the other thing is going to result from this. And as it turns out, they're an extraordinary bunch of prognosticators.
You guys are crazy. Yeah. Well, wait.
No, the whole country is united behind this thing. Well, hold on a second. Hold on 10 years.
So here's, an example of how this plays out. This is, of all people, the most reasonable GOP representative in Congress, Ken Buck.
Well, now hold on just a second. Okay.
Oh, look at the bar. Look at that. He stood in place and everybody else took a step back.
I guess so. I mean, it was a dumb place, but yes. He stayed anchored to a terrible, ultra-conservative, stupid position while everybody moved to completely out of their minds.
Exactly.
I gotcha.
So, GOP Representative Ken, remember, he didn't vote for the impeachment of Mayorkas. He said this is stupid.
Yes.
So, GOP Representative Ken Buck reveals that Comer and Jim Jordan were warned that the former FBI informant's claims against Biden were not credible but, quote, they went out and talked to the public about how this was credible and how it was damning, end quote. In other words, they knew.
Okay. I believe that.
Anyway, that's just the
they
kind
know
of thing
now
that's
going
to wind up for all the people who aren't running, who are then free to say whatever they want. This stuff's going to come out, and it's going to be part and parcel of campaign ads where it gets drilled into people's heads by repetition, and then and only then does it really affect the voting public. But that's going to happen.
We have until a little after Labor Day to make it happen, I guess. Yeah, that's true. And you know it's going to happen. You know that Ken Buck is right because you see it happening still. When they went to, I don't think I saved it, but somewhere there's a headline floating around, and I can probably dig it up, that when they went, after all this news breaks, and they're like, okay, the key witness turns out not only to have been lying to the FBI, but doing so at the behest of Russian intelligence. And they went to Jim Jordan and said, what do you make of this? And he said, it doesn't change the underlying facts. Well, you're right. It doesn't change the underlying facts. It just reveals that the underlying facts were wrong. But what do you mean by that? Oh, we're going to be pressing ahead. No, he's still guilty of stuff, Biden is, and we're still going to impeach him. This changes nothing. I'm sorry, this actually changes everything. But that was his comment.
Of what you were doing. It's the basis of what why
David
Weiss got rid of the misdemeanor and diversion stuff. What are you talking about?
He's talking about just saying, what if I wave my hands and go, yargle, margle, margle, and just continue.
Which is what Jim Jordan did. And, you know, it's just not going to work.
It's quite
incredible. And Raskin
went
went on to say about his fellows on this committee, you know, the atmosphere around here is pretty much like this is over. They're just going through the motions.
I guess so.
Hey, when we get back from the break, I'm going to talk to you about Meghan McCain and Carrie Lake.
Yeah, okay, I saw that one. I'm anxious to hear what that's about and to root for both of them to lose in this fight. But, you know, but in a certain order. Okay, we'll be back after 2 minutes, and I guess, I don't know, I'll go gargle or something. And get ready for this Carrie Lake, Meghan McCain fight. Woo-wee.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and I'm trying to catch up with what Greg is illustrating for us here. I did see the screenshot earlier of the exchange between Meghan McCain and Carrie Lake, and apparently Carrie Lake's original statement, which prompted this response from Meghan McCain, is a lengthy one, and I only saw part of it. So you've provided me here, Greg, with the link directly to Meghan McCain's response, in which she's quote tweeting apparently Carrie Lake. But here's the news here at KITM headquarters. I can't see the tweet to which Meghan McCain is responding, because it says, you're unable to view this post because this account owner limits who can view their posts. Is that Carrie Lake who has locked her account or something, or blocked? I don't know, blocked me, maybe? I don't know. I don't hear you, though.
So I was just trying to fix this. So I will read you the screenshots and send you a screenshot later so you could see the whole thing.
Okay.
But it all starts with a political poll that came out from Emerson New Arizona Senate poll. Ruben
Emerson
Gallego,
Lake.
Democrat, 36. Carrie Lake, 30. And Kirsten Sinema, 21.
Oh. Okay.
And if you just look at Gallego and Lake, Gallego has 46 and Lake is 39.
So either way.
So Carrie Lake is trailing.
That is, well.
And Meghan McCain writes.
Trailer. She's a trailer.
This was before this poll came out. It was on February 20th. Meghan McCain writes, Carrie Lake is trying to walk back her continued attacks on my dad and family and all of his loyal supporters after telling them to, quote, get the hell out, end quote. Warning foul language coming up.
Okay, uh-oh.
Guess she realized she can't become a senator without us. And I'm just quoting her. No peace, bitch. We see you for who you are and are repulsed by it.
Yeesh.
To which Carrie Lake responds.
Oh.
Peace offering. Hi, Megan. As mothers, both with 2 kiddos, I know we both agree that our children's future is too important to let it slip away over past grudges or hurt feelings. That's why I'm working hard to unite Republicans, Independents, Democrats, all Americans. Yada, yada, yada. I want to make Senator McCain and Larry Lake proud. I value you. I value your family, and I value the passion you have for our state. I'd love nothing more than to buy you a beer, a coffee, or lunch and pick your brain about how we can work together to strengthen our state. Thank you, Megan. I hope we can connect soon. God bless. To which Meghan McCain responds with a quote tweet, no peace, bitch.
All right. Well, and in all caps
then,
at that.
Liz Cheney sees it and retweets that and says, I am so proud of Meghan McCain.
I guess so. What can I tell you? It's remarkable. This should only be understood as how bad is Carrie Lake? Bad enough that I see Meghan McCain and Liz Cheney together and say, yes, terrific. I'm on their side briefly for one narrow slice of issues. So difficult enough for me to get at. And
or as the commenters say, the McCain motto said out loud.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there is that as well. So I think I'm blocked by Carrie Lake, which I guess is nice.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't really been on Twitter for a year or more, so it may be an old lingering thing, but terrific. Whoever's managing her
Megan and
social
Carrie
media.
Have a lingering thing, so that would make total sense.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, people hold those grudges, and it may have been that whoever was handling Carrie Lake's social media during her last campaign saw me say something terrible about her, like a million other people, and just banned me, and that's it.
It's kind of fun story, and why are you talking about it?
Yeah, why are you talking about it?
Because this is the Republican Party writ large, whether you're looking at Michigan and the big fight over who's running the Michigan GOP, which is not resolved yet.
Who is Oh, okay. You don't know. I don't know either. All right.
Well, basically, it's Peter Hoekstra.
Yes, I think. Maybe.
But Christina Caramo doesn't acknowledge it.
Right. And also there's no money.
Broke, and they're still fighting over it.
Yeah.
And I'm just telling you.
Don't fight over broke
Party
organizations.
Is not in a strong position. They don't have any money. Trump is going to suck it all up for his defense.
Oh, absolutely.
The individual parties are fighting. I told you about Michigan. You see what's happening in Arizona. These are swing states.
Yeah, Arizona is way in trouble, too, with their funding. They've lost all their money.
As are others.
On the what do you call
Republican,
it? Audit. The fraud.
State-level GOP. And I'm just telling you, the Republicans are not in good shape. You just can't see it now because it's February.
Yeah. That's true, but all the warning signs are there. The reporting is out there, and this is something, to keep in mind while everybody frets and wrings their hands. What you're saying is, ordinarily, we read a little bit about this the other day, that ordinarily state parties, Republican and Democrat, both, are in the run-up during an election year, operating in anticipation of getting a giant infusion of cash from the national committees. That's their job, to raise that cash as a presidential race looms and then send large, enormous chunks of it to the states so that they can use it to run their Senate candidates, their House candidates, and to some extent even further down the ballot. But the idea, putting together a whole united party effort, and people who are running Republicans who are running in the hopes of taking over control of the U.S. Senate, and Republicans who are running in congressional districts in the hopes of holding on to the House for Republicans, are now finding out that 65% of the budget that they were counting on to do this is not going to show up. And if any emergency funds make themselves available to the Republican National Committee such that they ordinarily would send it to the states, Donald Trump has stationed Lara Trump there with a vacuum cleaner to make sure that it gets sucked up and burnt on losing efforts in court for his personal benefit. And taking all of that together, 50 different state-level unified campaigns that were supposed to, 1, put Republicans in Congress, and 2, defeat Joe Biden, are not going to be there. Even though Joe Biden will be old at the time, there will not be a unified campaign against him.
Yeah, speaking of not a unified campaign, the story I'm going to turn to is actually the IVF one because I think it's huge. Bigly huge. But it comes from a political playbook, and the title is What the GOP Would Prefer Not to Discuss. So we'll get to the IVF in a minute because that's one of the things. The other, of course, is Russian infiltration of the GOP.
Yes, and this is the IVF, not the IDF. Right. Okay.
When he said that so many years ago.
So many. Right.
I think these particular Republicans are owned by the Russians.
Yes, are paid directly, and well, okay, just one more time. That was a discussion about Ukraine, which seemed extraneous before, but now seems a lot closer to related.
In any case, before they get to that story, this Politico piece deals with a Ron DeSantis scoop. Ron DeSantis will undoubtedly wind up endorsing Trump. Everybody sort of expects that. But Florida Governor Ron DeSantis privately criticized Trump and said he wouldn't be Trump's running mate on a call first obtained by the New York Post. DeSantis also indicated that Susie Wiles had an axe to grind against them. Well, duh, you fired her.
Well, that's an axe.
And then she went and
or is that
decided
the grind?
to run the campaign that was going to grind you into the ground. So I would say yes.
Yeah, well, they both used the word grind.
According to this report,
so important.
He could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and the conservative media wouldn't even report on it that it happened, DeSantis said. They got a response from the Trump campaign. Chris Lascivitas said, "Chicken fingers and pudding cups is what you will be remembered for, you sad little man."
That's okay with me.
I'm telling you the story. It's a funny comment.
Yes.
But we're not talking about a united Republican Party. Everybody says, well, the Republican Party is united around Trump. 90% of them will vote for him. Well, 10% won't. And maybe you just made it 11%, maybe 12.
Maybe.
And, all you got to do is shave off a couple of numbers or have people stay home because, the money's not there. It's not coming in. Nikki Haley raised more money than Trump did last month.
Yeah, not ain't much.
And so, again, the signs and symptoms, the portents, the knuckle bones, they're all there. This is not the juggernaut that people make it out to be. So that's one of the reasons why I think, people should just chill a little bit. The Democrats have their work cut out for him for various and sundry reasons, but so do the Republicans, and do not miss that part of the story.
Yes, I agree. All right, yeah, and chilling about it doesn't mean, of course, don't work. It means just don't think about the cloud over your head while you work.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, keep working, keep doing exactly what you were doing, but wring your hands a little less.
Wisconsin and New York 3.
Yeah, you can moisturize the skin on your hands, and it won't be rubbing off while you wring them. How about that? That's enough chill.
So the big story here, GOP faces IVF ruling blowback. If Republicans didn't realize it when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, they sure understand now. The long tail of the Dobbs ruling just keeps whipping Republicans with thorny political consequences.
Oh.
In leather, maybe they like it. I don't know. No. The GOP's latest nightmare scenario comes from Alabama, where the state's high court found on Friday that the destruction of embryos constituted a crime under the state's wrongful death of a minor law. That's led the 8th largest hospital in the nation to stop IVF indefinitely, while other healthcare providers likely to follow. Already, Republicans are being forced to answer for a policy that's not only out of step with public opinion, but very personal and potentially devastating for the 1 in 6 Americans who struggle with fertility issues, including one of the authors of this piece that she writes later on that, full disclosure, affects me too. The decision not only risks alienating swing voters, but highlights how the consequences of Dobbs continue to crush Republicans up and down the ballot. And again, I would add New York 3 because Tom Suozzi chose to make that a big part of his campaign. And guess what, folks? It worked. Still.
Yep.
It certainly intersects badly with general election politics for Republicans. Stan Barnes, a political consultant and former GOP Arizona state senator, I should ask him about Kari Lake and Meghan McCain and where he comes in on that, told our colleague, when a state, any state, takes an aggressive action on this particular topic, people are once again made aware of it, and many think, well, maybe I can't support a Republican in the general election.
Yeah.
Fancy that. People actually saying that out loud. The issue is already rearing its head on the campaign trail. Yesterday, 2024 hopeful Nikki Haley, who's been open about her own struggles having children using artificial insemination to conceive and lectured Republicans for being too harsh on women who've had abortions, told the NBC that she agrees with the Alabama ruling, embryos to me are babies. You know, the old Monty Python, every sperm is sacred thing. Okay. Democrats, meanwhile, are on the attack. DCCC spokesperson Nabiat Betre told Playbook voters are tired of Republicans' dangerous and blatantly anti-women agenda and vowed that House Democratic candidates will make sure to continue holding Republicans accountable for their disastrous impact on women's rights.
Mm-hmm. And everybody's...
This decision is yet another proof point that extremists are hell-bent on stripping women of our reproductive freedoms and privacy any way possible.
The IVF story, I think, expands that circle quite a bit, of course. I mean, usually there's partners involved somewhere along the line.
You know who else used IVF who wound up, commenting on this, who's a Republican?
No.
Mike Pence.
Maybe I do. Well, that's obviously blasphemy.
Pence told Playbook last year he fully supports the practice.
Darn it. What are we going to do? These guys don't seem to have a story.
Right.
Well, that is unusual.
What are Republicans doing about this? They don't
hanging Mike Pence.
About it.
I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say hanging Mike Pence.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what they'll probably do. Oh, another reason to hang Mike Pence. Yeah. No, they don't want to talk about it.
Oh.
Another Politico story that's not Playbook, just a regular old story. Another hot potato, Alabama's IVF ruling risks political legal backlash. Well, yeah. And then their subheading is GOP could pay for it in November. Well, guess what? They will.
Well, you know what? They can't. They can't pay for anything, but they will pay for it in terms of votes. That's the one asset they have left, I suppose, was counting on some votes. And since they're out of cash, they're going to have to make a barter for paying for it.
And what this does is it brings up a much bigger story, just as you could talk about the fact that the impeachment of Hunter Biden was built on bogus lies from somebody who spoke to the FBI, and Armando went through yesterday why just filling out a form isn't the same thing as proof of anything.
Right, sure.
The bigger story is that Russian disinformation has infiltrated the GOP. This IVF story, big as it is important in regard to GOP political fortunes this fall. But the bigger story is that it's part of the GOP's drive for Christian nationalism. Mike Johnson as speaker, the ruling that the Alabama justice had, judge, I don't know what they call him at the state level.
Wackadoodle.
Quoting the Bible as part of his legal decision is nuts.
Yes.
But again, this is Alabama. This is Roy Moore country.
Yes. And this wasn't Roy Moore, was it? It was Roy Moore gone?
It was somebody even more extreme.
That's pretty amazing. That guy wants a statue of the 11 commandments to be on the courthouse lawn.
What he really wants is the 7 mountains. So we got to talk about that a little bit. This is from Matthew Taylor, who studies this stuff. The sharp-eyed folks at Media Matters noted that Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice Tom Parker gave an interview to, and I forget what this stands for. Forgive me, NAR. It's the National Apocalyptic Reformation or something like that, revival.
Really? Oh.
Prophet Johnny Enlow.
Apocalyptic? I don't know. Okay. Great. Let's look it up.
Let's look it up.
National A-Hole Radio.
National Association of Realtors? No, it's not
them. No, but they're not great either. But all right. Some of them are your friendly neighborhood realtors.
The New Apostolic Reformation.
Sure.
A movement which seeks to establish a fifth branch within Christendom, distinct from Catholicism, Protestantism. And it largely consists of churches nominally or formally associated with Pentecostal denominations, but have diverged in that it advocates for the restoration of church governance by the lost offices of prophet and apostle, which they believe were lost in the first centuries of Christianity.
Stay lost. I was going to say, when they say fifth branch, like, do they mean a fifth branch of government? And then it sounded like it was actually a fifth branch of denomination. But now it's come back around to sounding like, no, they do mean a branch of government. Like that there should be ecclesiastical courts like there used to be in medieval times.
So what MMFA said is during a recent interview with a QAnon conspiracy theorist, the Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice indicated he's a proponent of the Seven Mountain Mandate, which calls on Christians to impose fundamentalist values on all aspects of American life. That's where the Chief Justice is coming from.
Wonderful. I have heard of the Seven Mountains thing.
As Matthew D. Taylor showed in Charismatic Revival Fury, Episode 3, the Seven Mountain Mandate is a charismatic, that is to say, rooted in modern prophecy and miracles program intent upon achieving Christian supremacy, and it originated in the year 2000. The entire New Apostolic Reformation infrastructure of tight-knit apostles and prophets amplified the Seven Mountains idea and spread it around the non-denominational charismatic world around 2007, 2008. And
like
in
when Jesus was
Johnny
around.
Enlow wrote a book called The Seven Mountains Prophecy.
Sure.
Enlow is a friend of the NAR, and you'll encounter a lot of conspiratorial speculation about this, particularly here on Twitter, that makes these networks sound like a shadowy cabal of Christian leaders who manipulate American politics. But here's how it really works.
It's not that?
The apostles and prophets aren't mysterious people furtively meeting behind closed doors. These aren't the Templars.
Okay.
They are global celebrities in the relatively sequestered media ecosystem of charismatic media, and what they do is out in the open. They have hundreds of thousands of dedicated followers. And the fact that most of us aren't watching and don't recognize the major leaders is often misinterpreted as though they were obscure or cryptic. But they aren't they're public. Johnny Enlow is a household name. He's also very extremist. He often traffics in QAnon conspiracy ideas. In the lead up to January 6th, Enlow argued that Trump should declare martial law and execute his enemies. And especially since the Seven Mountains teaching took hold, NAR leaders have cultivated relationships with like-minded local and state executives. And then here's Tom Parker displaying his fandom with Enlow out in the open with an interview. So their ideas are extreme and fueling the polarization. And as Paul Jupe, who I often quote, has shown, greater than 20% of all Americans today endorse the Seven Mountains framework.
Oh, good.
So if you listen through the interview, you can hear Chief Justice Parker embracing the Manichaean frameworks, good or evil, angels versus demons. You're one or the other. There's nothing in the middle. So don't, go into this wild speculations about spooky Illuminati. They're out in the open. They're talking about it. They have a lot of traction. And the risk isn't merely combustible incidents like January 6th. It's a very real risk of Christianity-inflected violence again this election, and that's why we're concerned about it. And this is all in the context of what Alabama just did with a Chief Justice who's an adherent of this.
Yes.
And so that's the bigger picture.
Okay. I don't know if I don't know I haven't asked people what's concerning them about this particular set of wackadoodles, but I have not noticed that anybody thought that the real danger of their existence was that they might be meeting in secret rather than speaking to one another in public. But okay.
Right. Well, Trump does all his crime in public. He doesn't hide it.
Yeah. Right. Just as
he does all his confessions in public too.
That's how he works.
Yeah, I took those documents. No, I didn't have to give them back. That means you had them, right? Well, of course I had them. They're mine.
Yes, but insofar as being sentenced, no, I don't have them. If I'm going to be sentenced to prison, then I do not have them. But if no one's going to threaten me, then yeah, I have them because I'm very strongly having them. I don't know.
This is Dan Pfeiffer at the message box over at Substack. The 2024 version of blogging. Alert, Trump's vision for a Christian Nationalist U.S. revealed. A new report shows the danger of sending Trump back to the White House. Well, it's been a crazy few weeks of news on the Trump beat. One day he's urging Russia to invade NATO. On another, he's attacking Nikki Haley's husband for being absent on a campaign trail when he's in the military. There's the $350 million fine. They're all important. It's possible you missed the critically important story that appeared in Politico yesterday, though. According to reporting from Alex Ward and Heidi Presbala, an influential think tank close to Donald Trump is developing plans to infuse Christian nationalist ideas in his administration should the former president return to power, according to documents obtained by Politico.
Yes.
Spearheading the effort is Russell Vought, who served as Trump's director of the Office of Management and Budget during his first term and has remained close. Vought, who's frequently cited as a potential chief of staff, is president of the Center for Renewing America think tank, a leading group and conservative consortium preparing for a second Trump term. Few voters have heard Trump's NATO comments. Even fewer heard about Trump's fraud verdict, but I would bet none of them have read a single word of this, says Pfeiffer. I would also bet my life that the prospect of the Trump administration implementing extreme Christian nationalist policies would be more concerning to swing voters than the NATO comments or the fraud. That becomes relevant because of what Alabama just did with IVF and how it is now a major political issue and going to be a campaign issue.
Okay.
And so that's the whole bigger picture here that I'm just trying to wrap up for you.
I can understand that. Now, not mentioned there, but I think working in conjunction with this group, the other story that we've heard about because we're political junkies, but nobody else has heard about is, I think Dan's probably largely right about that, is, but we've mentioned, because there's been a lot of write-ups about it, the Project 2025 group.
Yes.
There they are, in fact, in some cases, I guess not unlike the Seven Mountains people, though they do hold some of their meetings in private, they too are quite public with what they're planning and where they think this is leading. The Heritage Foundation has been at the center of a lot of this planning too, and they too, like the Republican Party, have evolved into a crazy bunch of wackadoodles. They used to be sort of the staid movement conservative types, but movement conservatives have all mutated into, Alabama Supreme Court types. But I did happen to see today, I guess right alongside growing awareness and then burgeoning outrage over things like the IVF decision in Alabama, the Heritage Foundation is out there tweeting this screen grab of their stuff that I saw. It's their statement on this, or one of their leaders' statements. It seems to me that a good place to start would be a feminist movement against the pill and for returning the consequentiality to sex. Conservatives have to lead the way in restoring sex to its true purpose and ending recreational sex and senseless use of birth control pills. Not only can you not use IVF, but yes, every other form of birth control that was advocated previously. Well, we can avoid abortions this way if people are using birth control. Well, we're against that too on religious grounds, and we're going to make, as part of our Republican platform, no more recreational sex. I don't think that's actually popular out there, so I'm not certain
right.
it'll have a real
to steal
impact.
a line from Woody Allen, and in addition, we'd like everybody to be forced to wear their underwear on the outside so we can tell whether or not you've changed it. I mean, these are nutty people.
Yes.
And nobody's paying attention to this, and they're not hearing it. We're not political junkies. You don't hear about it until the campaign, until after Labor Day. Or as Dan Pfeiffer puts it, voters will only hear about it if Democrats and all of us tell them. Well, Democrats are going to tell them.
Yes.
These people are nuts.
I hope
and
so.
I'm just, again, trying to make the overall larger case. What do the polls tell you? Do the people answering the polls know about this stuff yet? No, they don't. What happens when they do? Well, we'll have to see. That's why it's too early to tell right now. That's what happened when John Kerry got Swift voted. The polls before that said he was winning. After that, not so much. Mike Dukakis, same thing.
Yeah.
What happened? Well, he was winning by a lot. And then what happened? Well, the campaigns happened. That's
George W. Bush was, or George H.W. Bush was winning by a lot at one point as well.
Yeah,
as he was heading into his second election.
So don't pay that much attention to it, especially when this kind of information is not reaching the people who need to hear it. How did he mention about political junkies? Some of you might be surprised to learn that very few voters know about major stories.
Yeah, that is kind of surprising.
Even the ones that dominate cable news and your social media feeds. The chasm between political junkies in both parties and everybody else has never been greater. One example of that are the people that were quoted in stories saying, I'm against Biden because it was on his watch that Roe got axed.
Yes, people do come away with that impression.
And you go, what?
Yeah. Well, a lot of things make me say what.
You have to explain it because people just don't know. You either consume a ton of political news or no news whatsoever.
Yeah.
And the no news people decide the election. And
there are more of them.
Democracy. So our job is to tell them. And so, it's part of the reason why we have this podcast, but writ large, you have to expect that telling is going to happen from the conventions onward. Yeah, the State of the Union's helpful, but what really matters are the conventions, which are stage commercials.
Yes.
They're television commercials for the party. That's where you hear about a lot of this stuff.
That is true. And by the way, yes, there's a movement on among, I don't know who, but among the punditry. Well, maybe the Democrats ought to throw their opportunity for a staged commercial out the window and instead televise chaos. Nah,
Greg Sargent interviewed David Axelrod, one of the proponents of this, and actually got him to say, okay, it was a nice discussion. It's over. Biden's the candidate. Good. Let's move on.
Okay. Well, that's nice. Good work, Greg, because, the other guy gets paid. Axelrod gets paid to be the contrarian here.
Yeah.
So, all right.
So pretty interesting.
Nice. All right. Well done. That is good news. I guess this is it. We get to watch the Republicans campaign on everybody should stop having sex forever for any reason, except if you're one of us, I guess, in which case, by the way, pay for your girlfriend to have an abortion if necessary. But it's pretty much what everybody has always suspected. And the time is
and by the way, just as we close out, this is a tweet from Dana Hool, our friend Dana, who pointed out that Pew Research had looked into IVF stuff.
Yeah.
Only 18% of Republicans think that health insurance should not cover fertility treatments.
Yeah, I mean, they used to love that.
This is incredibly popular.
Yeah, it made babies happen.
It's going to hurt Republicans.
Okay. Well, good. Let's get started. When does it start hurting them? Can we start now?
I would like yesterday. Anyway, take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday. Maybe stuff will happen.
Yeah,
maybe. The Supreme Court. Who knows?
Who can say for sure? Speaking of the Supreme Court, now that you've been telling me about the Seven Mountains thing, I have to go back and read. It's a different group that Amy Coney Barrett is very close with and been involved with for years. Maybe we should find out what they're up to. If that kind of stuff is creeping into the Supreme Court's work in Alabama, could it be creeping into Supreme Court's work here on the federal level? All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I got to tell you that during the break, we fessed up to the fact that as scary as it is that Amy Coney Barrett is, in fact, wrapped up in something that has been described as being something of a Christian cult, she is considerably smarter than, I think, most of the Alabama Supreme Court and disguises things very well. It's part of what makes her actually quite dangerous. But there you have it. Don't know whether that agenda survives the Republican platform against recreational sex, but will that even make it into the platform? We really don't know. By the way, apropos of nothing, I just wanted to let you know, in case you were not feeling old and didn't think that time was flying, Trip Palin, Bristol's son, Trip Palin is now 15 years old. Just so you know where we've been in terms of back and forth and here and there and on the other side and back again when it comes to Republican platform treatment of recreational sex. And, of course, I guess they would point to this and say, well, it wasn't recreational sex because, of course, it was recreational sex. Get it? Procreative sex. Because she decided to keep her child rather than seek an abortion or practice protected sex with birth control. Although I think, I don't know. I don't want to really parse the story too much, but I think Bristol Palin's story may have been like, oh, no, we were using birth control. We just it didn't work through no fault of our own. And then the fact that she decided to carry her pregnancy to term and deliver her son makes this non-recreational sex. It's purposeful sex after the fact, of course, but whatever. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. And it's also worth noting that at 15 years old, Tripp is about 2 years younger than Bristol was when she got pregnant with him. And so we're in for another generation of Palins soon, is I think what I'm trying to get at. And, don't kill yourselves just because that's going to happen. They've never been particularly effective in politics, so it's okay. And really, his focus seems to be more on, did you know that there are going to be people who object to, why are you even bringing him up? He's not a public figure. Oh, yes, he is, for one thing. And for another, in case you didn't know how public he really was interested in being, you know that Bristol Palin, of course, participated in Dancing with the Stars because she hated the spotlight and wanted to be out of the public eye. Like years after her mother had not been involved in politics for some time and really their star had faded, she decided to cash in and do Dancing with the Stars. As it turns out, I checked it out, Tripp Palin has been on Dancing with the Stars. So there's a Dancing with the Stars Junior of some sort. I don't know whether that's like only online or on some weird cable station or whether that's mainstream. I really, honestly, had no idea that was the case. Anyway, as it turns out, he was on that too, so he's a bit of a public figure. Not that we don't need to spend a lot of time talking about him, but there you have it. I don't know. It just occurred to me the other day that he's out there and existed, and wouldn't he be kind of in his teens at this point? Just sort of, that's apropos of nothing, but there you have it. That's where Republicans have been on the subject of sex before marriage, i.e. recreational in their view. Now they're going to ban it, but before, when they were kind of stuck having to admit that, yeah, we're humans and we do this thing, even though we advocate that people not do it, we do it, and when we're kind of caught and there's no way to avoid it because we can't hide it, we fess up and say, hey, that's America. But when we catch you doing it, we should throw you out of America. And something, 7 mountains, et cetera, et cetera. Just general hypocrisy that should at this point surprise no one. As a matter of fact, along those lines, a story that I most pointedly will not be reading to you in its entirety. I just thought we could throw that out there. This is another thing that they're going to have to reconcile in the upcoming election. And with no money to do it, I just thought I would note for the record that NBC News carries this story by Natasha Korecki, who notes for us that Amy Brown, who's Amy Brown? She's the wife of Gops Senate candidate Sam Brown. And in what state is Sam Brown running? He's, I think, Nevada. And Amy and Sam went on TV to open up about her abortion for the first time publicly, which I'm sure was very difficult for them. But it is essentially, it's a story that they seek to spin into, see we're kind of relatable, but also I regret it a lot now. And the reason I'm anti-abortion now is the amount of regret I had about my abortion, and I don't want you to have the same regret, I guess, is the story that they're trying to go with, which, I'm sure there's a kernel of truth in there. I'm certain that there are people who feel very badly about it and have regrets, and I guess for whatever reason come to the conclusion that it's better for me not to allow other people to make the same choice because I want to prevent their regret, not, taking into account, what if the regrets are even larger when you decide to go the other direction? Or what if the regret is less, but the trouble is greater, and I offer no help in dealing with that trouble, and in fact punish you for taking that trouble. There's also that. Anyway, just want to kind of put out there that there is a Republican vying for a Senate seat in Nevada, of course joining the Republican Party in an anti-abortion stance, but who nonetheless has this story for you. My wife, before I married her, had an abortion, which, of course, like changed the course of our lives, and we're enjoying a certain success now that we wouldn't have but for the availability of that abortion. But now that she's had hers, you can't have one, so screw the rest of you. Just putting that out there. That will no doubt become an issue somewhere along the line. But this is their attempt in sitting down with NBC News and trying to, tell their side of the story, of minimizing that so that they can fight it out later in an atmosphere where everybody is going to be concentrating on the importance of the availability of safe, legal abortion. So, anyway, now you know that. If we return to the Nevada race, I'm sure it will come up again. Okay, let's see. Other things to share with you. I guess, really, I want to go all the way back to the beginning of the story, or the beginning of the show, to share with you Philip Bump's explanation of what we heard about yesterday, the sawdust cocaine connection, if you will. And like I said, we jumped right into the middle of things. It's always like jumping into the middle of a conversation whenever you read one of Marcy Wheeler's pieces, because there's so much information out there and so much context that she's parsing. And unless you're reading everything that she's doing, and I do recommend trying to do that, I can't make it fit in my day, but maybe you can. Occasionally we have to go back and fill in the gaps. So Philip Bump actually has done that, and here's what he's come up with. Sean Hannity and the case of the sawdust, quote, cocaine. What the F is going on here? And this also explains, remember yesterday I was reading the piece that Greg referred to our attention yesterday in notes after his appearance on the show, which was, what was it? That was the title of this one. I'll scroll back and find it. Right. Empty Wheels title. Smirnov and Ablo, right? Smirnov and blow, i.e. cocaine, right? But then in brackets before the word blow, the letter A, and I said, and I think we figured out through the writing that was there, was that, okay, Ablo, I don't know how it's pronounced, is someone's name who's involved in this story somehow, but that wasn't explained inside the four corners of that article. But it was clear that it was a reference to someone. Bump takes care of that for us too. So it's a real a helpful piece in tying up loose ends or explaining things if you didn't quite grasp it yesterday. So I thought I'd share it with you. A central tenet, he begins, of Sean Hannity's, everyone knows him, right? Sean Hannity's on-air rhetoric over the past few years has been that the federal government, and specifically federal law enforcement, is not reliable, which of course we're now learning might actually have some kernel of truth to it, but not the way he says. You'll see what's going on here. After all, how else to wave away the various indictments of his friend and ally, former President Donald Trump? Right? It's all a setup. It's all a hoax, etc., malicious prosecution, blah, blah, blah. The Fox News host is not in a position to accept that perhaps there is some validity to the criticisms outlined in the charging documents with which Trump has been presented. So, like Trump, probably echoing Trump, really, Hannity claims that federal prosecutors and investigators are soaked with hostility to the political right. He insists that the prosecutions Trump faces are about politics, not about Trump's actions. And years of his and other right-wing pundits' disparagements of the feds as tainted provide a robust foundation for those arguments. So, imagine the internal conflict Hannity must have faced when asked to choose between defending federal prosecutors, who he hates and thinks are constantly overreaching, and defending someone with the last name Biden. Oh, well, federal prosecutors are always corrupt and overreaching because look what they did to Trump. Well, is that what's happening to Biden? No, they're right about that one. Sometimes they can be. At issue is the photograph included in a Justice Department filing this month. Now we're getting to the cocaine story here, the not cocaine story. President Biden's son, Hunter, as we all know, was charged in September with making false statements in an application to obtain a gun, which everybody wants to obtain, even Chiefs fans. They're going to a rally, they want to bring a gun with them. Everybody loves having guns. He wants to have one? No. Anyway, he made false statements in an application to obtain a gun, which is still a no-no. Specifically, that he was not, at the time that he wanted the gun, using illegal drugs, which is a barrier to getting a gun. To bolster the case that the younger Biden's attestation about drug use was false, prosecutors working for special counsel David Weiss compiled examples of Hunter Biden's contemporaneous discussions of drug use. Okay, that's would tend to prove that maybe there was reason to believe that he was, in fact, using drugs, despite the fact that he said he was not at the time that he wanted the gun, right? That's what's going on here. During November and December of 2018, the prosecutor's filing reads at one point, the defendant, Hunter Biden, took multiple photographs of videos, photographs and videos probably, of apparent cocaine, crack cocaine, and drug paraphernalia. So, I mean, what you're really looking for here when you're compiling evidence that somebody's drug use, the denial of that drug use was a lie, and the fact of that drug use was true, and so therefore they should not be allowed to have a gun, but also should be charged with lying on the federal form when they went to get that gun. The proof you're looking for is, I used cocaine at that time, and falling short of that, I saw him use cocaine at that time. And failing that, maybe then, if you had pictures from the defendant's phone or laptop computer of what looked like drugs, you might say, aha, this, I think, could be seen by a reasonable juror to be the sort of evidence that might help them infer that there was drug use going on at the time. Like pictures of drugs on my phone would do it. Well, what about pictures of things that aren't drugs, but that are arranged in ways that are suggestive of drug use? Would that be enough? Because that's kind of where we are. Well, if you had a picture, I'm gonna interrupt Philip Bump here for just a second, obviously, or 5 minutes at a time. If you had a picture, for instance, of sawdust lined up as cocaine, it might make you say, this is a person who's familiar with the usage of cocaine. I mean, we all are. We've seen it on television, I guess. Whether or not we've ever used cocaine doesn't matter. We've seen what they do with it. We've seen it in the TV and the movies. They line it up in lines and snort it, right? So if you were to line up sugar or sawdust or anything else like cocaine, you might say, that's a person who's familiar with it, but then you might have a good lawyer argue, well, for one thing, the client denies it, and for another, everybody knows from television and movies how that happens. Here's a picture of some 15-year-olds in a diner who don't actually use cocaine, and toxicology reports would tell you that they don't, and yet this spilled sugar was arranged in a line. Suggestive of knowledge of cocaine use? Yes. Suggestive of cocaine use itself? Not so much. Certainly not conclusively, you might say, right? But too late there, Hunter Biden has admitted that he's had a drug problem in the past. So lining up sawdust like it's cocaine might lead you to the conclusion that he was in fact using cocaine around the same time, and that's why it was on his mind, and that's why he did that with the sawdust. But guess what? What if I told you he didn't do that with the sawdust? What do you mean? How could that possibly be? Why, this picture is in his possession. Yeah, in his possession. So back to Philip Bump. During November and December of 2018, the government's filing here reads at one point, the defendant took multiple photographs. It says photographs of videos, apparent cocaine, crack cocaine, and drug paraphernalia. That could mean he took multiple photographs and videos of apparent cocaine, crack cocaine, and drug paraphernalia. But it also could mean, just for the sake of argument, that he took photographs of videos in which apparent cocaine, crack cocaine, and drug paraphernalia made appearances. Why do I float that? Let's get to the rest of the story. This photo, this here displayed embedded in the story, is the photo that follows that assertion, right? The prosecution says, well, he took multiple photographs and maybe also videos of apparent cocaine, etc. And this photo then illustrates the point. And there it is. It's the photo that Sean Hannity is talking about and what was circulating the other day. The picture of sawdust lined up on a weird-looking table. But more to the point, it also, if you look at the photo, you're like, what is this photo exactly? I'm not entirely sure because it appears to be a reflection in a mirror of something. Is this like a zoom in on something that was in the background of a Hunter Biden photo, or what exactly is this? It's in a mirror, but the mirror is also leaning up against something, and you can't really tell what the hell is going on here. But there it is. And you're meant to focus on the lines of whatever this substance is. And even if it is sawdust, why doesn't it suggest that what's immediately obvious, Bump then follows up with this, what's immediately obvious are, of course, the lines of powder at the center of the image. Lines that certainly comport with a lay person's understanding of cocaine consumption. But everything else in the photo is a bit odd. What's all that other powder that's shown? It's the same color. It's all over the floor. Like, that's one thing that does not really comport with a layperson's understanding of cocaine consumption, that you would throw your expensive cocaine all over the floor. No, they're usually pretty careful with it not to spill even a drop, not to let anything go to waste. So what is all that other powder that's exactly the same color that's shown? And what's that orange thing embedded in the table? And why is this apparently a photo of another photo that's contained in a beveled glass frame? What exactly is going on here? The composition of this photo. You got to see it to understand it. But once you see it, you'll know exactly what you're talking about. And you'll see it when you read Philip Bump's piece for yourself. In a response to Weiss's team filed on Tuesday, Hunter Biden's attorneys put forth an actual answer. One, this isn't a photo of cocaine. That's helpful. Nor is it a photo taken by Hunter Biden? And that really kills the whole thing. So why do they say that? This argument was first presented effectively by journalist Marcy Wheeler. Hooray! And it is cited in the filing from Hunter Biden's lawyers. They say Marcy Wheeler explains what's going on here. They too should have been able to explain what was going on here. Because they would ask Hunter Biden, well, what's the story with this picture? But they didn't even have to get to that because Marcy Wheeler, when she saw it, she understood it right away. She noted that a social media account linked to the site Marco Polo, run by former Trump administration staffer Garrett Ziegler, had already pointed out Weiss's mistake. Hunter Biden has sued Ziegler for publishing material allegedly sourced from a laptop Biden once owned. We all know the stories of the Hunter Biden laptops, right? Well, in this case, though, the social media account used that archive of material to show that the photo above was sent to Hunter Biden. Not that Hunter Biden took it, but it was sent to Hunter Biden. Well, then he's consorting with people who are involved in cocaine use. That's why they would take such a picture. Why would they think to send it, of all people, to Hunter Biden, if not to say, hey, we both like cocaine usage, and though this isn't cocaine, won't it be reminiscent of those fun times with cocaine? Let me give you that picture. Well, that isn't it either. It was sent to Hunter Biden by who? It would be important to know. For two reasons, once you hear the name. It was sent by psychiatrist/social media personality, or I guess regular, traditional media personality, Keith Ablow, or maybe Ablow, I don't know, but that's where the A comes from, Ablow. Unfortunate name. given the situation, but he's a psychiatrist. Why is a psychiatrist and media figure sending pictures of cocaine-looking sawdust to Hunter Biden? Well, Hunter Biden had been seeing Ablo, I don't know how he pronounces that, professionally, because he's a psychiatrist, as he struggled with addiction. At one point, Biden left another laptop in Ablo's office. I do have questions about why Hunter Biden is so casual with where he leaves his laptops, but, I've forgotten my laptop in some places, but then I went back to get it. And I also keep a pretty tight lid on how many laptops I have. I tend to have only one or perhaps two in use at any given time. Anyway, but he left another laptop in his psychiatrist's office, where it was eventually seized by government investigators who were investigating not Biden per se, but Ablo on a different matter. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Ablo, somebody who actually knows how his name is pronounced is probably gritting their teeth every time. But anyway, this guy, this psychiatrist, according to a message shared by Marco Polo that Marcy Wheeler had seen, according to a message shared by Marco Polo, that message also was included in the response from Biden's lawyers to the government, shared the image above that we discussed as a sort of inspiration for his client. So where did this pictures of the lines of sawdust come from? Keith Ablo shared it with Hunter Biden for the following reason. This is the message that goes along with the original transmission of the photo. Keith saying, this picture in my office is of lines of sawdust. Well, that clears up the mystery. What's that a line of? Sawdust. Lines of sawdust. Why would anybody make lines of sawdust, though? What if the answer was this? The one in my office is of lines of sawdust sent to me by a master carpenter who was a coke addict. I told him that ultimately, this is before he actually sends the picture, really. I told him that ultimately he would have to choose between his art and his drug. Why does he tell him such a thing? Because he's a psychiatrist. So he's probably seeing as a patient or perhaps as an acquaintance, but giving him good advice nonetheless. A guy who's a master carpenter and a coke addict. Look, you're going to have to choose between your art and your drug. Because if you go with the drugs, you're just going to end up not being able to practice your art that you love so much. You're going to have to make a choice. Well, he sent me a photo and a message that said, made my choice. So this was this guy's clever thing of saying, I'm a coke addict, but I'm giving it up. I'd rather be addicted to my art. Why, look. And symbolically lines up the sawdust as cocaine. This is what I choose to be addicted to instead, my artwork as a master carpenter. And that's the message. So Keith is saying to Hunter, this picture is of lines of sawdust sent to me by a master carpenter who was a coke addict. I told him he'd have to choose between his art and his drug. He sent me this photo and said, made my choice. Hope you do too. You, Hunter Biden, should make a choice between your art and your life. And he is an artist. Don't forget that. That comes up. But you have to choose between the art and everything else in your life and the drugs. And I hope you will make the same decision this master carpenter did to leave behind the cocaine and go with the art instead. And that was it. That's the provenance of this picture. This one is in my office of lines of sawdust, etc., etc. Hope you will do the same thing and make the same choice as this carpenter. The photo is clearly Ablo's. This messaging aside, by the way, a March 2020 YouTube video shows the framed photo on the mantle over Ablo's shoulder. So it's just an extraneous thing. He's a media figure. He's done YouTubes in the past. And here's one that happens to be in a setting in 2020, March 2020, where you can see that photo incidentally over his shoulder on the mantle of his I don't know what, his office. But at any rate, it's in the same spot and helps explain. Like if you then stood up and took your phone and took a picture of that picture on the mantle in your office, that's how it would look if you then sent it to Hunter Biden along with the story of, hey, I happen to have this photo and think you should draw some inspiration from it. In summary, then, a carpenter suffering from addiction was indicating to his doctor that he had chosen to pour himself into his woodwork, his art, and Abloh appears to have sent that to Hunter Biden, suggesting that he hoped Biden would do the same. Biden's art, which does exist, was painting, something he refers to as an aspiration in his memoir, and that has triggered its own controversies in the years since. But all that aside, the context suggested in the apparent message from Abloh makes sense, and it explains the provenance of the picture. Isn't that amazing? I can't believe there's a real explanation. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. There's more. Philip Bump has more. Yes, but we've explained the provenance of this photo now, and that's extremely important. Now, some other details surrounding the story. So, as we were saying, all of the provenance aside, the context suggested in the apparent message from Abloh now makes sense. It is a photo of a framed photo, something that it doesn't make much sense for Hunter Biden to have on his own. Like, why is it? I mean, this is where they find it, on one of his laptops or phones. Aha, well, he's got a picture of sawdust lined up. Even if we admit it's sawdust, it's lined up like cocaine. This is indicative of somebody who's still involved in cocaine usage. Well, he is, and you've got him already, dead to rights on that. He's told you one of the first, hopefully, steps of recovery is admitting that you have that problem. But okay, it's all done. He's not denying the drug problems. He's not even denying the falsification of the paperwork for the gun acquisition, I don't think, at this point. But, you know, if you're going to be showing this picture around and saying, see, well, then you ought to explain what the picture is. So, why does he have it? Why would you have a photo like that on your phone? Well, the answer is somebody sent it to me for the purposes of inspiring me to get off drugs, which is actually kind of exculpatory. But here you have it in your filing, in the prosecutor's filing, as evidence of continued drug use, and it just isn't. And it was kind of obvious from the beginning, because the context in which it exists on Biden's laptop is alongside messages that explain that this is not meant to be reminiscent of or inspire continued drug use, but to convince you to stop instead. But why doesn't that get mentioned? Well, anyway, yes. So it's a photo of a framed photo that it doesn't make any sense for Hunter to have on his own. If he owned the photo or took the photo, why would he be taking a photo of the photo framed at some later date? That does not make any sense. It appears to also house a circular saw blade, and of course, the yellowish powder next to it would then naturally be sawdust. So, from a legal standpoint, such a mistake would be embarrassing for Weiss's team and would raise questions about the reliability of other presentations. But the photo is just one of several pieces of evidence suggesting Hunter Biden's drug use, something that is also admitted in the president's son's memoir. So why are we still interested? Enter Sean Hannity. In a segment focused on elevating questions about the alleged corruption and illegality of the Biden family writ large, right? He put the image of the cocaine/sawdust lines on screen and says what? Lawyers for Biden's son Hunter just had to explain in court a filing that this photo, take a look at this photo right here. Look at that photo from his phone that the government prosecutors claimed show lines of cocaine. That's what the government prosecutors are saying, Hannity said. They're saying, that is, Hunter's legal team is saying, that's sawdust. Take a good look at sawdust lined up in perfect little lines. Take a close look. Does that look like sawdust to you? Yes, it does. We'll let you decide that. Now, it's actually, in hindsight, now starting to sound like, yeah, you guys found out that that was sawdust, but you needed to try to make a save here. So you said, sawdust, give me a break. Who lines up sawdust? Well, somebody who is A, not Hunter Biden, B, not one step removed from Hunter Biden, but 2 steps removed from Hunter Biden, and C, someone who is saying, given a choice between continued drug use and continued application of my artistry, which happens to be woodworking, which happens to create sawdust, I am going to make my choice between the two of them, as you, the psychiatrist, suggest, and I am going to symbolize that choice in this way. Yes, it's lined up like cocaine. No, it's not cocaine. And yes, it's indicative of my choice to leave cocaine usage behind. But I'm not Hunter Biden. I'm not even someone who knows Hunter Biden. I am someone who sees the same psychiatrist as Hunter Biden and who the psychiatrist thought might be able to inspire Hunter Biden to do the same by showing him the picture. Hunter Biden received that picture. That's the crime. That's what Sean Hannity is framing him with on national television. Why? He received a photo from someone else taken by a third party of not cocaine in an effort to demonstrate that they no longer wanted to have anything to do with cocaine. So you can see the corruption of the Biden family. We need to impeach that guy's father. Okay. This is all jumbled, as Philip Bump points out, but the intent is obvious. Hannity is casting doubt on the idea that the image is actually of sawdust. It's fascinating that this is Hannity's approach. First of all, he's basing everything on the filing from Hunter Biden's legal team, in which the Ablo text is prominent. It's worth noting that Ablo was, for a long time, a contributor to Fox News, as it turns out. But, second, in the battle between Hunter Biden and the federal prosecutors, whom he has lambasted generally, that is to say, that Hannity has, and in Weiss's case specifically, for years, Hannity's impulse is to side with the feds. It is more useful to him to reinforce Hunter Biden's addiction than to highlight the prosecutor's apparent mistake. All of this is admittedly tangential to the Hunter Biden criminal case, but Hannity offers a useful lens into how all of this is deployed politically. Sure, defending Trump from the purported overreach of the federal government is important to the Fox News host, but not as important, it seems, as disparaging the Biden family at all costs, I would add. And that is the end of Bump's explanation. Tying all of this together, I think it's been very useful. So as I mentioned earlier, turns out I did put aside this piece from The Hill that I mentioned to Greg in passing, at least I didn't remember what it was from, but this is the story I told you about earlier. Headline here, Jim Jordan, brushes aside indictment of FBI informant in Biden impeachment inquiry. Michael Schnell writes this one up for The Hill. House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan is brushing aside the indictment of the FBI informant at the center of the Gops allegations against President Biden, arguing the source's arrest, quote, doesn't change the fundamental facts, unquote, of the Republican case against the president. Of course it does. There's nothing else that it does do. The Justice Department indicted Alexander Smirnov last week on allegations he made up information involving the Bidens, including his claim that the then vice president and his son Hunter each accepted a $5 million bribe, an assertion central to the Gops impeachment inquiry against the president. Last year, Jordan said, quote, the impeachable offense is, I think, the key thing is in Burisma. Okay, that's the quote, so he's stumbling a little bit here, but the key impeachable offense is, I think, the key thing is in Burisma. In other words, it's Burisma and their offering of the bribe that's supposedly central to the impeachment. And yet, as it turns out, they're indicting the guy who says that he heard there was such a bribe, because they can prove, apparently, it's not just that they can't trust him. FBI takes statements from people they decide not to trust all the time. But it is fairly rare, I think, for them to say, I also think I can indict him for lying and make it stick in front of a jury, as opposed to just ignore that guy. He's lying. I think I could prove it, but it's worthless to even try. This one they're going to try. But Wednesday, nearly a week after Smirnov's arrest, Jordan downplayed the significance of Smirnov's claims, that his claims play in the conference's impeachment inquiry into Biden. Well, I mean, it is what it is, Jordan told reporters when asked about the indictment. It doesn't change the fundamental facts. Of course it does. The Judiciary Committee chair went on to list a number of long-running GOP complaints involving Hunter Biden and his involvement with Ukrainian energy company Burisma. Those facts, they don't change regardless of what this confidential human source is saying, Jordan said, referring to Smirnov. But that's a nonsensical statement, of course. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer has delivered a similar message, believe it or not, arguing that the impeachment inquiry does not hinge on Smirnov's claims, which were memorialized in an FD 1023 form. To be clear, the impeachment inquiry is not reliant on the FBI's FD 1023, Comer said in a statement last week, but that is the opposite of clear. They do, in fact, rely on the 1023 because there's nothing else. Democrats, however, have pounced on Smirnov's indictment in their campaign to cast doubt on the Gops impeachment inquiry. Last week, Jamie Raskin, the top Democrat on the Oversight and Accountability Committee, called on Republican leaders to end their probe in light of Smirnov's arrest. On Wednesday, Raskin said the revelations involving Smirnov destroy the entire case. Smirnov was the foundation of the whole thing. He was the one who came forward to say that Burisma had given Joe Biden $5 million, and that was just concocted out of thin air. And not just thin air. It was concocted by Russians out of thin air and then fed to Smirnov. And then Smirnov carried it to the FBI. And so it was that foundation that the whole house of cards has been built on, and the entire thing has collapsed. The controversy surrounding Smirnov depended on Tuesday. The controversy surrounding Smirnov depended on Tuesday. Depended, really? That doesn't sound like it's the right word, but it escaped the spell check, I guess. Something, we'll see what, on Tuesday, deepened, maybe? On Tuesday, after the Justice Department revealed in a filing that Smirnov said he received his information about Hunter Biden from Russian intelligence, right? Now, reminder, he told the FBI initially, I received that information from a guy I knew at Burisma. Well, the FBI's digging then ends up proving there's no way that you could have met the person from Burisma at the date that you said you'd met them. So what do you have to say about that? Okay. Well, actually, I got that information from a different source. Well, who was that source? Russian intelligence. Well, that's bad. I'm sure he didn't just blurt out Russian intelligence, but I guess it's now been established. I got it from somebody else. Well, that guy is involved in Russian intelligence. Oh, maybe he didn't know that. I don't know. Maybe he did. During his custodial interview on February 14th, Valentine's Day, Smirnov admitted that officials associated with Russian intelligence were involved in passing a story about business person one. The filing reads, business person one, Hunter Biden. Raskin on Wednesday called that a shattering revelation. The comments from Jordan and Raskin came the same day that James Biden, for no other reason, I guess, than the fact that he's a Biden, the president's younger brother, appeared before the House Oversight Committee as part of the Gops impeachment inquiry into the president. Oh, the Hunter story fell apart. What about James? Republicans have alleged that the president was involved in his family's business dealings, prompting claims of corruption and influence peddling. On Wednesday, however, the younger Biden testified that his brother, quote, never had any involvement or any direct or indirect financial interest in his business ventures. But shouldn't we say that that doesn't matter and we should impeach him anyway? Yes, that's what they're going to say. That's the kind of people they are. That's essentially what they're up to here. Let's see. Another thing that I could share with you along those lines that I just spotted, I think, in my email. I think we all sort of feel this and agree, but it is an opportunity to read Amanda Marcotte for today. So why not take a look at this? We moved from Jordan to Comer. Now we can move and tie Comer and good old Tucker Carlson into things under this headline. James Comer and Tucker Carlson aren't fooled by Russian lies. They're complicit. That's something we could probably entertain at this point. It would be easier, the subheader of the piece says, if we could believe Republicans were being played by Putin. But the truth is much worse. Of course, Amanda Marcotte in Salon magazine dated, this morning, just this morning, she has this for us. Last week, the, quote, whistleblower that House Republicans were counting on to justify a long-planned impeachment of Joe Biden was arrested for lying to the FBI. In a twist that would probably surprise exactly no one, it appears almost certain that Alexander Smirnov's claim to have evidence implicating the president and his son Hunter in criminal activity was fabricated. Worse yet, it also seems plausible that the source of the lies was Russian intelligence services. House Oversight Chairman James Comer had built the effort to impeach Biden around Smirnov's invented testimony, and has now tacitly admitted that his arrest may derail the Biden impeachment, which has been in the works since long before Republicans had even decided what, quote, crime they would pretend to believe Biden committed. Now, that's an interesting interpretation of where Comer stands, that he tacitly admitted that this may derail things. And there's a link. I got to check it out. And it's from another Salon piece, Tatiana Tendanpoli, whose name I believe I've struggled with in the past and called out at least once. The math keeps getting worse, is this piece. Begins with this quote in the headline. James Comer admits he may have to give up on Biden impeachment probe. Amid the lack of evidence, House Oversight Chairman admits Republicans' Biden gambit isn't looking so hot. And I guess maybe that was the initial reaction, and maybe he has tried since to wriggle free of it. It's a short piece here. But I guess he's saying here, speaking to the news source last week, the news source, Spectrum News, Comer indicated that the House holding a vote is decreasingly likely. I would say increasingly unlikely. But anyway, because the math keeps getting worse for the GOP, a statement reflecting Republicans' narrowing majority and internal skepticism about the merits of the investigation, right? They were close enough on the Mayorkas impeachment, but now they have people like Ken Buck and others who are also holdouts on not just Mayorkas' impeachment, but also Biden's. And presumably there will be more Republicans joining them as the case collapses. So, okay. But yet, by yesterday afternoon, he was willing to wriggle free from that and join Jordan in saying that it didn't change the underlying facts. I don't know which came first, but it's not good to have both of those comments in the same week. Anyway, in the wake of Smirnov's arrest, back to Amanda, a narrative has surfaced among the punditry holding that Comer and the Republicans who championed Smirnov's fictions must be a bunch of morons. Joe Scarborough of MSNBC, it says MNBC, missing the S here, the bellwether of centrist Beltway thinking, unleashed on Wednesday morning about, quote, Republicans being played once again by Vladimir Putin, adding that Republicans are so stupid in the House they can feed Russian disinformation straight into the veins of the United States Congress. Other outlets have been less aggressive with the name-calling, while still running with the assumption that Comer must be embarrassed to be exposed as a laundromat for Kremlin propaganda. Even legal blogger Marcy Wheeler, who tends to be bullish on Russian connections to Trump-friendly politicians, ran with the dupes narrative, at least once anyway, this embedded tweet saying the detention report that Smirnov is spooked up means that James Comer and Jim Jordan were easy dupes of Russian spies. That a February 20th take from Marcy. I don't know whether she's clarified it at all since. There's a puzzling unwillingness among much of the press to consider the most obvious reason why MAGA Republicans keep taking Putin's side, whether it's over aid to Ukraine or Donald Trump's hostility to NATO. They prefer Putin's anti-democratic vision to the tattered but still surviving democracy of the U.S. There's simply no evidence to suggest that Comer feels the slightest shame over using taxpayer money to be a cutout for Russian intelligence, or even that he is surprised by these revelations. On CNN on Tuesday, House Oversight Committee member Dan Goldman, Democrat of New York, suggested there might be more than stupidity motivating Comer and his fellow impeachment fanatics. Wittingly or unwittingly, House Republicans have been acting as an agent or as an asset of Russian intelligence for Vladimir Putin, he explained. And with that word wittingly right there for the taking, he pointed out that Trump's first impeachment, which he worked on as a House Democratic lawyer, exposed how much Russia had worked to spread disinformation about the Biden family. There's no reason to reach for ignorance as an explanation, Goldman concluded. Republicans are willing to be used as assets of Russian intelligence. And in the 2016 campaign, Trump asked them to do exactly that. Russia, if you're listening, give us some story that we can plant in the American media for you. That was the subtext of his comment. If you're listening, do this. Give us the information, fake or otherwise. We don't care. We'll plant it in the American media. And Comer has been doing the same thing. Goldman is, I think, maybe at the forefront of making the claim. Maybe it's easier for middle-of-the-road journalists and pundits to think of them as dupes, but this is important to point this out, right? If for them to look at what happened in the Smirnov indictment and say it doesn't change the underlying facts is a big clue about this. And this is great to tie it back to that first impeachment, as I always do, with the story of Kevin McCarthy saying, well, I think Putin pays Trump. And I know we all latched onto it, and you've heard me say it a million times. It's important that that took place in the middle of a conversation among the Republican leadership, then leadership of the House of Representatives, in the context of just having met with the then Ukrainian prime minister about Russian aggression, Russian invasion, a Russian attempt to take over and dismantle the country of Ukraine. And they discuss it all there. And then, of course, it's all derailed by saying Putin pays Trump, which may actually be true and is interesting and important and a different focus. But yeah, it's real. What's really interesting, or always has been to me, is that a couple of years later, they were impeaching Donald Trump for leveraging Ukraine's precarious situation caused by Russia, and which Donald Trump threatened the Ukrainians would only get worse for them unless they did his bidding and gave him smear material against Biden. Even if you have to make it up, just do that and give it to me. And then maybe I'll help you out against the Russians. Except, wink, wink, I'll never help you out against the Russians because I'm on Russia's side in all of this. It's important to know that. Who blurted it out? Kevin McCarthy. He thought he was changing the subject a little bit, but as it turns out, he was discussing the same subject, which is why you found Trump impeached on that confluence of the two subjects the first time around, which is rather amazing. And there's some other writing, and I think Marcy's got some that connects this whole thing at a higher level as well. But we can't get to that today. We might be able to get there tomorrow. Let's conclude with what Amanda has for us in this piece. A strong case that Republicans are acting out of malice rather than ignorance can be made from the behavior of former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, the self-appointed vanguard of right-wing depravity. Earlier this month, Carlson ventured to Moscow to host a tongue bath, quote, interview with Putin, in which the Russian leader told outrageous lies, while Carlson, as Salon's Andrew O'Hare wrote, played the role of, quote, dim but obsequious schoolboy. One lie that should be obvious even to Americans. Putin blamed the onset of World War II on Poland, which he claimed had forced the Nazis to invade in 1939. And one thing everybody was really interested in doing was forcing the Nazis to invade them back then. And they had to be forced, you see. Carlson then did a travel infomercial for Moscow, marveling at the fancy grocery stores for oligarchs and the sparkling subway stations, arguing that Americans have been misled about life in Russia. Okay, defector. The apparent implication was that it's worth the mass murder of Ukrainians and political dissidents to get clean subway cars. Paul Krugman of the New York Times retorted that while parts of Moscow offer a small elite and opulent lifestyle, Russia as a whole is a bit more than ramshackle, or more than a bit ramshackle, noting that 1/5 of homes don't even have indoor toilets, and that Russian life expectancy is substantially lower than in the United States. Carlson was called a useful idiot by many observers. I don't even know if he's that useful, but he's certainly an idiot. A phrasing that suggests he may have been sincerely confused about whether an expensive neighborhood in Moscow was representative of the entire nation. How ironic, too, by the way, that you take a visiting quote-unquote dignitary. I mean, he's not a dignitary, but to take him to basically to a shopping place, a supermarket, to convince him of the superiority. It's interesting since it's, of course, a reverse mirror of Khrushchev's visit to the United States way back when. But anyway, so yeah, he was called a useful idiot in all of this. A far more likely explanation, though, is that Carlson was just lying. We know from Dominion's successful lawsuit against Fox News that Carlson knowingly lies to his audience and, frankly, thinks it's funny to do so. But perhaps the biggest giveaway came in Carlson's digressions aimed at New Yorkers, telling them you can't use your subway because supposedly it's too dangerous. Now, in fact, of course, roughly 3.5 million people rode the New York subway on average each day in the last year. So, yeah, you can use it. Millions of you do. Carlson used to live in New York, of course, so he knows full well that people in the city do not, in fact, think the subway is too dangerous to ride. Violent crime in the city is down overall and very rarely happens on subway trains. these days, but people who believe otherwise are likely to be Fox News addicts who don't live in New York and rarely visit. I'll never forget the time, Amanda tells us, that a Republican voting relative came to stay with me in Brooklyn. We were making a trip to the Upper East Side, and her husband freaked out when I insisted we take the subway, correctly pointing out that a taxi ride of that length would be both miserable and expensive. But her husband, for some reason, forbade her to wear a skirt. But as soon as we got on the train, she marveled at how chill and clean everything was. That's the audience Carlson is talking to, and he knows it. It's much the same story with Comer, who has winkingly acknowledged on occasion that his relentless accusations against Biden are inventions. Last year, for instance, just try to sneak this in, he all but confessed to the New York Times by noting that many of his, quote, leads had in fact come from QAnon message boards. Rather than toss obvious nonsense in the trash, he happily investigates the tips fed to him by conspiracy theorists. You know, the customer is always right, Comer told the Times, referring to what the reporters called the vengeful hard-right voters who propelled him to stardom. For people like Comer and Carlson, a guiding principle is that the truth simply does not matter. The only value information can possess is to serve their political purposes, no matter how blatantly false it is, or how evil the people peddling it may be. Nor should we expect them to feel any embarrassment when they're exposed as liars. On the contrary, that only serves the Gops' goal of breeding widespread cynicism in the public. Rather than trying to untangle all the conflicting accusations about malfeasance and Russian involvement, many people, especially low-information swing voters, will just shrug and say all politicians are liars. The end goal here is to normalize Trump's nearly infinite record of lying and criminal behavior by adopting his reckless disregard for the truth and his loyalty to Russia over America. Republicans like Comer are inching toward their perverse goal of making Trump's extreme corruption seem commonplace. Not a great place to land, of course, but apparently, well worth pointing out, certainly to consider as we move forward. And it is time now to move forward and allow Justice Putnam to take over the microphone with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy takeover. Well, we gladly yield. You'll enjoy it, no doubt.
You've been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Some of the things he's got on tap: an Orange County, California federal judge who has just been censured for past racist remarks to court officials has dismissed criminal charges against members of a Southern California white supremacist group, saying that there's a bias against the far right. Oh no, just what we didn't want to see happen.